Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Boris Johnson, the front-runner in the race to be Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister, now says that he will take part in the BBC television debate with the other contenders next Tuesday. In a radio interview, he said it was perfectly realistic to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement with the EU before the end of October. But the UK should step up preparations for a no-deal Brexit to help get an improved deal. The leadership race lost one candidate today. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, announced that he was dropping out, leaving 6 men going into the next ballot of Tory MPs on Tuesday. With more, here's our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar.
Leader of the pack, the strong, silent type.
You afraid of scrutiny or a gaffe, Mr Johnson?
Well, was he up for facing live interviews, joining the other candidates in a BBC TV debate? Turned out today he was.
I've always been keen on TV debates and slightly bewildered by the conversation that's been going on. And the best time to do that, I think, would be after the second ballot on Tuesday.
He'd decided risking a slip or setback was worth it, better than seeming to hide away. His pledge, no surrender. He'd deliver a managed Brexit, deal or no deal, by October the 31st.
The only way to make sure that we convince our partners that we're determined to get that outcome is to prepare for no deal. And I think it would be absolutely bizarre to signal at this stage that the UK government was willing once again to run up the white flag and delay yet again.
As for the big barrier to a deal, how to avoid stops and checks on the EU's Irish border after Brexit?
The obvious way to do it is to make sure that you have checks on anybody who breaks the law, as you would expect, but you do it away from the border.
What about using cocaine, a damaging admission by rival Michael Gove? Mr Johnson treated it as almost something trivial.
Note my words, a single inconclusive event that took place when I was a teenager.
Moments earlier, the first to drop out. Health Secretary Matt Hancock's 20 MPs' votes in the last round and his own now up for grabs.
Where I have put myself forward as a candidate focused on the future, the parties understandably focus very much on the here and now and how we get through Brexit in the next few months. And so I've decided to withdraw from the contest.
In other words, the big issue in the coming debates and rounds of voting next week is how willing the next Prime Minister will be to leave the EU without a deal. That and who's best placed to take on the front runner. Jeremy Hunt saying his negotiating experience in business and as Foreign Secretary mean he can get a deal where Theresa May failed. So trust him, not Boris Johnson.
His hard stop on the 31st of October is effectively saying that the best we can offer the country is either a no-deal Brexit or a general election if Parliament succeeds in stopping that no-deal Brexit.
So 6 runners left. Michael Gove in 3rd place and trying to accelerate.
I'm looking forward to a contest of ideas and to exchanging thoughts with other candidates about how we can make this country better in the future.
Rory Stewart warning against no deal and against Boris Johnson.
He keeps saying he will deliver Brexit by the 31st of October. But how? We need to get into the details of how it's going to happen.
Brexiteer Dominic Raab, you know they're campaigning when the hard hats come out.
I think this is the start of the race. We all know about the curse of the front-runner in Conservative leadership contests. There's many a slip between a cup and a lip.
And the Home Secretary, like all of them, needing to gain ground.
The question now is who's going to go up against Boris, and I think that what I offer is a good choice, a fresh choice for the party and for the country.
So this isn't just a race to Downing Street, it's a chase. The prospect of calling number 10 home has tantalised Boris Johnson for years. Now it may just be within touching distance. Just now, most MPs here would say this is looking like a fight for second place on the party members' ballot. That the only person capable of beating Boris Johnson may just be Boris Johnson. Brexiteers like the promise to leave the EU on time, deal or no deal. The message that preparing for no deal may be the best way to avoid it happening, that's meant to appeal to the rest. But there are still crucial weeks to come. Rita, this isn't over. Not yet.
Many thanks, John. John Pienaar there.
Now they are 6. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has withdrawn from the Conservative leadership race, leaving just 6 contenders in the mix. although the front-runner Boris Johnson is refusing to take part in Sunday's leadership debate on this channel after apparently having issues with the format. His rivals have urged him to debate them. Paul McNamara reports.
He wants to swap this door for a shiny black one with a number 10 on it. He just hasn't seemed keen on debating why he should be given the keys.
Mr Johnson, why don't you trust yourself to do these debates? You said they were essential back in September. Do you not still believe that?
Favourite from the start, the real question of the Tory leadership race has been who will be the person with him in the final two. After the first round of voting yesterday, the candidate list reduced to these 7. And today, it's down to 6 as Health Secretary Matt Hancock pulled out mid-morning. He told us he'd been campaigning to be the young leader of the future. But the party, he says, wants to focus on the here and now.
The best thing to do is to withdraw from the race and find the best way to advance the arguments that matter, advance the values that I care about. And I'll talk to all of the candidates. I've spoken to them all already.
Come on, you've known all of the candidates for a very long time. Which one gets your backing?
Well, I'm going to talk to them over the weekend.
You've known them for ages. Come on, you must have someone in mind.
Well, I'm going to talk to them over the weekend.
So 5 now facing off to take on Boris Johnson, and last night they signed a joint letter that was all but addressed to him, saying the leadership contest provides an important opportunity to debate, to shape and to define the ideas which will underpin those competing visions. That is why we're committed to taking part in the Channel 4 televised debates this Sunday and the BBC programme next Tuesday.
If we're going to be putting ourselves forward to lead the country, there can't be any hiding from the visions and the policies and the cut and thrust.
Come on, Boris, you're a great communicator. You have nothing to be afraid of. You're one of the greatest natural communicators in British politics. Let's have it out.
Mr Johnson has taken part in live televised debates before.
They will take us further and further into the United States of Europe.
OK, this is complete scaremongering. Boris, I have to call you out again for misleading the public.
Under mounting pressure today and at less than an hour's notice, Boris Johnson put himself up for an interview and told BBC Radio this.
I think the public have had quite a lot of blue-on-blue action, frankly, over the last 3 years. We don't necessarily need a lot more of that. And so what I think the best solution would be to have a debate on what we all have to offer the country, our programme to take Britain forward, my programme to unite the country. And the best time to do that, I think, would be after the second ballot on Tuesday. And the best forum is the BBC, the proposed BBC debate.
So why not Channel 4?
I've just given a very long answer to the...
That's good, we've got time. So why might Boris Johnson be less keen on the debate proposed by bosses here at Channel 4? Well, it's in front of a live studio audience, which can add a level of unpredictability. And by Tuesday, when the BBC debate takes place, at least one, but maybe more other candidates will be eliminated. Which means Mr Johnson might not have to face off against Rory Stewart, his biggest critic, the man who in the last round of polls received the fewest votes of all the candidates still left. Tonight, Channel 4 said they were disappointed that Mr Johnson will not be taking part, but there will be a lectern available if he changes his mind.
Far be it for us to lurch into the land of cliché, but the battle for Downing Street really does seem to be Boris Johnson's to lose. As the other candidates try to stay afloat, the front-runner even felt sufficiently confident to give a radio interview today after weeks of avoiding thorough questioning. So what did we learn? There was a slightly fuller idea of the Johnson plan for Brexit, more on that later, but we also got a sense of how he's trying to overcome the doubts many in the parliamentary party still harbour about him, and of how hard it'll be for the other candidates to beat him. Here's David Grossman.
All signs around Westminster point to one destination right now. In a world full of political uncertainties, there's one dead cert, isn't there?
But here's the thing about received wisdom at Westminster. It is, whisper it quietly, not always right. Think back to the 2015 general election, the Labour leadership contest that followed the 2016 Brexit referendum and the 2017 general election. Westminster opinion gloriously wrong on every count. But this time, Boris Johnson is different, right? Right?
I think it's Boris Johnson's to lose. History tells us the front runner rarely wins in a Tory leadership contest, but it does look as though Boris Johnson is testing out that theory, and it does seem very hard now for him to lose a place in the final two.
One person who definitely won't be stopping Boris Johnson is Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, withdrawn from the race today. His pitch was for the party to appeal to younger, more metropolitan voters, currently turned off by the emphasis on Brexit.
The party clearly is looking for a candidate to deal with the here and now. I very much put myself forward as a candidate focused on the future. And so I've decided to withdraw from the race and instead see how best I can advance those values within the party.
Matt Hancock's withdrawal means that his 20 votes are now up for grabs, and there are another 30 votes from the 3 candidates eliminated yesterday. Andrea Leadsom, Mark Harper and Esther McVeigh all drew their support from the Brexit side of the ledger. It's not clear how many of these votes will go to Sajid Javid, Rory Stewart or Jeremy Hunt, who all campaigned to remain in the 2016 referendum. Right now, all the candidates left in are having to figure out a way of staying distinctive and staying in the race.
The weekend will be filled with frantic phone calls from various candidates and their colleagues, reaching out to MPs who people think are undecided or whose candidates have dropped out, trying to persuade those MPs to back their candidates. And I'll be doing exactly that, encouraging people to support Sajid Javid.
In an orderly fashion.
But of course, this isn't just about MPs. Given where the beating heart of the Conservative Party members who will decide this contest lies, will they really pick anyone who isn't a Brexiteer from way back? After all, someone who voted Remain has already tried delivering Brexit and failed.
Morning.
Today, in his first broadcast interview since the contest kicked off, Boris Johnson was hammering home his credentials, in case anyone had forgotten.
We can get to a situation in which we are able to leave smoothly with an orderly, managed Brexit, and that's what we should be aiming for. But the only way to make sure that we convince our partners that we're determined to get that outcome is to prepare for no deal.
Apart from Boris Johnson, there are now only 2 names left in the contest who campaigned to leave the EU: Dominic Raab and a more popular choice among MPs, Michael Gove.
I think the Boris Johnson team would be rather happy if it was Jeremy Hunt who managed to make that final 2. I think it would be harder for Boris Johnson to go up against a Brexiteer, someone who had voted leave in the referendum. I think that would be a tougher sell. And there are also some MPs who think that Sajid Javid could give Boris Johnson a fight in the final 2. They think Sajid Javid's backstory means that he has a good message on opportunity for all.
So come Tuesday, we should have more signs of who's going to make the final 2, with at least one and possibly more candidates eliminated. Then, on Tuesday night, where Boris Johnson's ducked out of a Sunday leaders debate on Channel 4, he is turning up to one on the BBC with all of the candidates.
David Grossman there. Well, we have one of Boris Johnson's supporters on the line to discuss the Stop Boris campaign. But first, we're going to take a closer look at whether his solutions to the Brexit impasse stand up to scrutiny. On Radio 4's World at 1 today, he said he had an obvious solution to the Irish border issue and that it was perfectly realistic to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement.
Everybody understands the flaws in the backstop, and MPs on all sides of the House condemned it. The solution is obvious, and it's something that it's something that actually united MPs on all sides of the House when they voted for the Brady Amendment.
Senator Neil Richmond is the Irish government spokesperson on European affairs. Welcome. Senator, it's obvious.
Yes, it's obvious that the solution for the UK to leave the European Union in a managed way is through the withdrawal agreement that has been negotiated, that was agreed by the British government and the European Council back in November. That withdrawal agreement, containing the guarantees for the rights of citizens, British citizens in Europe and European citizens in the UK, the guarantee that the UK will see off its financial contributions and obligations, and indeed that we have a 3-part method to ensure that there is no hardening on the border of the island of Ireland that provides no threat to an international peace treaty lodged with the United Nations that both the Irish and British governments are co-guarantors of.
OK, maybe I should have put the question differently, but clearly Boris Johnson's point is it's obvious there is another way to do this.
The whole suggestion of alternative arrangements, technological solutions, or indeed the context of the Maltese Compromise that was trashed out a number of months ago has all been put before. And we've been quite clear from a European point of view that we need real guarantees to guarantee that the border on the island of Ireland maintains itself as completely open and free. We very much hope to do that through a deep and meaningful trade, customs and regulatory agreement between the EU and the UK as a whole. If not, we will indeed look at alternative arrangements and technological solutions. However, none of these, no credible solutions have been presented. So therefore we do need the backstop in order to provide that insurance, that guarantee, both for the Irish and British governments, but us as the European side as a whole, that make sure that we protect that peace agreement. The suggestion that alternative arrangements can replace that is completely out of left field, and it does not stand up to scrutiny. The withdrawal agreement is closed.
Let's deal with alternative arrangements briefly. Yes, some of it has been examined before, technology, for example, but even under the arrangements envisaged currently, certain types of regulatory check are envisaged, aren't they? Not customs, if the withdrawal agreement went through, but regulatory checks away from the border, animal health, that kind of thing. So it's not an outrageous idea, surely, to extend that principle.
Well, to be frank, we've put quite clearly that if alternative arrangements or technological solutions are to be the future, we need to see real proposals, not aspirations, real, genuine, meaningful proposals that are in operations.
He's not suggesting...
We have not seen that. People have mentioned it, but we've never seen it, and we cannot provide a legal guarantee based solely on aspiration.
I've got to push you on this, though. He's not suggesting primarily technological solutions, is he? He's suggesting physical checks away from the border, which is something which in the regulatory part of what's been planned now, obviously not the customs part, but the regulatory part on standards and things like that is envisaged. So why would it be so outrageous to extend that principle to more goods or things coming across?
Well, with respect to the comments of Mr Johnson himself today, but indeed I would like to address the wider comments, not just of people running for the leadership of the Conservative Party, but indeed people from the Labour Party and across the British political media spectrum. And a 20-second or 30-second intervention on one radio show does not provide a full solution to what is the most pressing problem for us going forward. We have to guarantee the peace. We need the insurance policy, the backstop, which isn't just based about regulatory alignment. It's very important. It deals with customs. It deals with an EU-UK-wide customs agreement, something that was a major concession by the European side. The withdrawal agreement and the three parts relating to the situation on the island of Ireland is very, very clear. Once we agree with the withdrawal agreement, we can negotiate, of course, absolute flexibility on the future political framework.
Very briefly,
that's where the European side wants to go to.
I'm sorry, we're running out of time, but very briefly, though, you would surely accept that the deal as currently formulated is not going to go through the British Parliament?
Well, to be honest, this isn't just about the whims of the British Parliament. This is about an agreement that was negotiated over 18 tortuous months and agreed between two actors. There's two actors in this, the European Council and the United Kingdom. The only way in order to achieve a managed Brexit is through this withdrawal agreement. And I think there's a lot of people talking about alternatives and renegotiations that are simply not relevant to the argument. The withdrawal agreement is how to achieve a managed Brexit.
Thank you very much for that. OK, well, let's talk now to Robert Buckland, who's a supporter of Boris Johnson's and Minister for Prisons. Welcome to you too, Mr Buckland. Can I just start off with a story that's in the Telegraph tonight, which is that there's a proposal to allow Boris Johnson's name to go through unopposed to the party membership. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I don't know where that's coming from. The party is preparing for a large number of hustings events right up and down the country, and I think members are looking forward to playing their part in what is a very important process. And frankly, having that process puts all the candidates under scrutiny. The last two will be under particular scrutiny, and I think that Boris would welcome that test and welcome putting his case to the members. So I don't know where that story is coming from.
Well, let's go back to Brexit then, because I don't know if you heard what Senator Neil Richmond was saying, but it was cold comfort for the idea that there was an obvious way through this. Surely everything that Boris Johnson is putting forward has actually been tried before and it hasn't worked out.
Well, I think that's a little unfair because when you chart back through the course of events at the end of the withdrawal agreement votes, there were supplemental documents that were agreed between the UK and the EU, which specifically mentioned the aspiration on alternative arrangements and how they could indeed deal with and replace the backstop issue.
They don't disaggregate it as Boris Johnson was talking about today. That's not going to happen, surely.
Well, I accept they're part of the political element of the negotiation. But, you know, the EU have said that, of course, although they've been pretty firm about the legal text of the withdrawal agreement, they've left open the door to the political declaration. And that might be the way back in to, in effect, allow changes then to be made to the withdrawal agreement rather than having a complete root and branch renegotiation, which I accept is unfeasible.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, do you think, in a matter that is as detailed as this, he's got the right brain for it? Because even his admirers say detail isn't his strong point.
Well, look, I think that when the chips are down, Boris Johnson knows how to do serious. And I think that you mustn't confuse somebody who perhaps doesn't take themselves too seriously with somebody who doesn't take the job seriously. And I'm absolutely convinced that he will be taking this with the utmost seriousness, that he'll assemble a team round him who will be working night and day to achieve a constructive way forward, working with the Irish government, working crucially with the EU as well, to follow up his declared policy of wanting to achieve a deal, which is something, of course, I wholeheartedly support.
You said earlier this year that no deal was something you didn't even want to contemplate. But he clearly feels he has to, and has to do so very publicly in order to win over the party grassroots. Is he going to sort of tack left on this as soon as he gets through this and actually give his commitment to getting a deal? He seems to be getting closer to that.
I don't think...
For example, in what he said today.
I don't think we're in this... We're not in sort of US primary territory where the candidate tacks to the base and then tacks away immediately. I think the course of events is going to be somewhat more tortuous than that. I think rightly he is leaving options open, either for a negotiated deal and a settlement that gets us out in a clear and orderly way, or indeed a scenario which frankly we've been preparing for as a government, the no deal scenario. I think the real test is between order and chaos. We must avoid a crash out, and that means that we've got to redouble our efforts under his leadership to prepare for every eventuality, and that's what he clearly is talking about in his interview today and indeed in his remarks beforehand.
But you would be happy with a no deal in that context, would you?
Well, look, I want to avoid the crash out. I think that the withdrawal agreement negotiated was the best way forward. I voted for it 3 times. I still think it's a good deal, but I'm realistic that the politics has changed. Parliament does not seem to want this withdrawal agreement. We've had European elections. The whole scene of politics is shifting, and we as responsive politicians have to recognise that. And that's why Boris Johnson is now the man for these unprecedented times. I might not have been saying this to you 6 months ago, but the world has moved on, and I have to recognise that, listen to the views of people out there in the country, burst through the Westminster bubble, and we do that with Boris Johnson.
Well, Buckland, I'm sorry, we have to move on, but thank you very much for that. Time is almost running away with us, but we've got Alice Thompson from The Times in the studio to talk through a couple of articles in tomorrow's papers, starting with one in The Guardian by Gabby Hinsliff. They are both Boris articles, I should warn you. Gabby Hinsliff, Johnson's campaign launch, supporters booed a journalist for asking a difficult question. It was ominously Trumpian. Do you share that take, Alice?
I do actually, to a certain extent. I think that Boris was very much divide and rule there. He was nice to some journalists, not nice to others, tried to shut others up, didn't answer any of the questions at all, really. And I thought was quite divisive and, in that way, was quite Trumpian. And he's very much dominating who he'll talk to and who he won't talk to and what he'll do and what he won't do. And it's all about him and... he wants to take control of the media completely.
He wasn't the only candidate, though, to have supporters in the same space, was he?
Yeah, no, that's fine to have your supporters there, but it's...
But even if they start booing,
well, no,
journalists,
but
which is what happened
he
to
should have
Trump.
addressed that too. I mean, he should have apologised for that, I think. I think bad behaviour on your own supporters is not really to be tolerated. But he's never going to apologise for anything. We know that now.
Well, you worked with him for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't apologise for anything then, but he was more moderate then. He was definitely more of a liberal when I worked with him 10, 15 years ago on The Telegraph.
Interesting. Let's go back to this story that we alluded to at the beginning of the programme, which is in the Daily Telegraph. It's an exclusive by Christopher Hope. He says, he talks about a proposal to essentially let Boris Johnson's name go through to the party membership. We put that to Robert Buckland earlier in the programme. He said he didn't know anything about it and he didn't think it was a good idea. But anyway, this is Christopher Hope's story. Under the proposal, the remaining candidates would bow out late next week in favour of Mr Johnson. I suppose it'd be a sort of glorious coronation by 168,000 members of the party in the view of somebody. Do you invest
I
this
think
with
that's a
much
disaster.
credibility?
So Boris Johnson, he keeps talking about he doesn't want more blue-on-blue action, as if they're all going around fighting each other. But actually, they do need scrutiny, and it's really important. And it's important for him. He should want it, because Theresa May didn't have enough scrutiny and didn't have time to get her ideas together. And this will have to force him to say what he really wants to do and to think some of the things through. And actually, Matthew Parris got a very good piece in the Times tomorrow, which is saying you need to trust these 168,000. They're not automatically going to give him the coronation. They're not. You know, they are going to test him. They are going to talk to him. They will want to have views. And it is good for him to have someone else competing against him.
Lastly, briefly, we're almost out. As a percentage chance, is there any percentage chance that he won't get it, do you think?
Well, everyone always says that the front runner's not going to get it. And you have got some extraordinary people like Rory Stewart who've come from absolutely nowhere. I think there's a small chance, not a great chance, but there is a chance he might not get it.
Microscopic percentage. Alice Thompson, thank you so much.